So in our session we want to cover two things. The first thing we'll do is we'll look at profit, the Christian view of profit. What is profit? Is God against profit, and why is profit important? That's chapter 5, key takeaways. And then we'll move in and we'll transition to the living wages and price control discussion, chapter 6, key takeaways. This is where we'll get into more of this quote by AOC here that we talked about in the introduction. So let's begin then with the Christian view of profit, chapter 5, key takeaways. Let's first connect profit, the hatred of profit that we're seeing in our country. Let's connect that to socialism. I think we all realize that there is a growing hatred of profit in the United States, just like there's a growing hatred of the rich in the United States, and they're very much connected. Profit used to be something that we considered to be necessary. It was a good goal for a business to strive for profit, and it was expected. But today it's become sort of a dirty word, and anybody that pursues it has to pursue it sort of out of the public view. And if you end up with too much profit, you better look out. You may get canceled. But this hatred of profit is directly an outflow from socialism. It is not related to capitalism. It is not related to free markets at all. It is completely a socialist idea. Because remember, the socialist goal, at least that's the stated goal, is that everyone in the economy receives the same resources of the society. That everybody gets equal of the money and the land and the cars and all of the resources of the society. Nobody gets any more than others. We are going to see that that's never true. We'll see that from AOC's comment here a little bit later. But because the socialist wants everyone to receive the resources of society equally, then profit necessarily must become a bad thing. Because profit is the way that some people end up with more than others. So profit must be taken from rich businesses and rich business owners and given to others. So when you hear this hatred of profit coming through the culture, you are hearing socialist dogma, socialist doctrine in your ears, because that's what socialists want to do. So that is how this connects to socialism. Well, let's ask ourselves, what is profit? A lot of times people get confused as to what profit is. You'll hear a report, for example, that says Exxon made $63 billion last quarter. And the implication in the statement is that that was all profit. But that's not usually what happens. This is not profit. Most of the time when you hear so-and-so company made so much last year or last quarter or last month, most of the time they're talking about something called revenue. Profit is not revenue. Revenue is what you take in collectively. It's all of the sales that you have. If Exxon sold $63 billion of oil and gas, that would be their revenue. But revenue is not profit. Profit is revenue minus costs. So we take our revenue, what we bring in, all that we sold, and then we have to subtract out all of our costs. We're going to look at some of those costs in a moment. And when we're done with that, then that's where we end up as profit. That would be our profit. And there are really two types of profit that we talk about. There's gross profit and there's net profit. Gross profit is when I just take out the cost of what I sold you. And whatever I have left is called my gross profit. So let's say that I sold you a shirt for $50. And my cost of making that shirt was $30. Then $20 or 40% would be my gross profit. But then out of my gross profit, I have to take the benefits I pay my employees, the rent I pay on my buildings, the cost of my secretary, the cost of my insurance, which is what's called overhead. And when you take the overhead out, then you end up with net profit. So you have gross profit, that's what you have left once you pay for the product that you sold. And then net profit is after you pay for everything else that you have to have in order to sell that product. So profit equals revenue minus costs. Let's try and visualize this formula a little bit. Profit equals revenue minus costs. Let's say that I have $100 in revenue. That's what I sold for that month or that week or that quarter or that year. And then when you add up all my costs, the cost of my workers, the cost of the product, the cost of my rent, the cost of insurance, then I end up with my net profit. Remember, there is also gross profit, which would be less than this 90. 90 is my total cost here. So my net profit is $10, but my gross profit may be $20 or $30. It's always more. But net profit is what is reported on the stock exchange and in our profit and loss statements and our accounting, and this is the true profit of a business. This is what a business is taxed on. It is not taxed on gross profit, it is taxed on net profit. And I'll explain in a moment why I'm mentioning gross profit and net profit. You'll see in just a moment why that is important. Let's take a closer look at the profits of a big company in the United States. ExxonMobil is one of the largest oil and gas businesses in the world. And this is a breakdown of their 2019 fourth quarter costs and profits. Let's look at this pie chart here and see where all of these costs fall and how much profit, net profit, they ended up making. 79% of the costs of the business were in the product and labor, getting the oil and gas out of the ground. That would be, if you subtracted that from their revenue, that would be their gross profit. So the remainder, you've got this big yellow section of this pie chart. The remainder of that, the blue, the orange, and the gray, that would be their gross profit. But then you have to take things out of that gross profit, like sales and administration costs. You have sales people that you have to hire, you have marketing that you have to do, you have administrative staff, accountants, people who don't directly work in the product portion of the business. You have to take that out. That was 5%. So of every dollar that they took in, 79% was the cost of the product that they were selling, 5% was sales and administration, and then 6% was interest and other fees. So interest on money they had borrowed, other costs that they might have that just won't fall under any other category. And so what you end up with when you look at the profit of ExxonMobil in the fourth quarter of 2019, only 10% of every dollar that they took in is actually profit. And that's about in line with what we call the S&P 500. The S&P 500 are the largest 500 companies in the United States. The average profit for the S&P 500 is about 10%. So ExxonMobil, while it is often vilified, only makes about an average profit. So in actual dollar numbers, in the fourth quarter of 2019, they had $63 billion in revenue, which sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. But keep in mind, this is a global oil and gas business here. Of course, they're going to have a lot of sales because they're selling a product that everybody buys all over the world. But out of that $63 billion, only about $6.3 billion was profit. So about 10%. So that's the cost and the profit of a big corporation in the U.S. Let's look at some other popular companies and look at their profit margins. And also we've got here a table that shows the tax rate that they paid on those profits. So we have here some companies on the left column: Amazon, Apple, Coca-Cola, Home Depot, Microsoft, Walmart, a number of different companies. And then we have their profit margin before taxes. And you'll notice that the lowest would be Walmart. That's just 4%. Now I want you to keep this in mind the next time that you get angry at Walmart because they're big and rich, when you realize that they work off some of the lowest margins in all of American corporations. Amazon, which takes a lot of grief also, is only at about a 5% margin. So that means out of every dollar they sell, 95% of it goes out the door in costs. We've got the highest here would be Microsoft at 34%. And then you've got JP Morgan Chase, which is about 31%. That's a bank. And Coca-Cola at 27%. So you can see some of these different percentages. And then we have the tax rate paid on the right-hand column. And it ranges from Microsoft at 10% all the way up to ExxonMobil, which we just talked about, at 26%. That means that blue section of that pie chart that we just looked at, they paid 26% of that pie chart, that blue pie section, to the government in taxes. So that's just a very interesting look at some of the margins and tax rates paid by some big popular companies in the U.S. But there are a lot of good things that come from profit. what a lot of the people are vilified for making profit, as if profit always goes to the rich guys and nobody else gets anything out of it. And this is where we're going to get into why I talked about gross profit versus net profit. Because what happens is some very good things come out of that gross profit that's left over before the net profit is even realized, that go to common everyday people. So companies that make profit are not just benefiting themselves. That profit actually goes to people who need it, people who don't make as much, people who are not quote unquote rich. Let's look at some of the good that comes from profit. First of all, profit provides money for benefits. You see, if I make something for 90 cents and I sell it for $1 and my gross profit is only 10 cents, I'm not going to have a whole lot of money left to pay good benefits for you, am I? So the more a company makes in gross profit and overall profit, the more money they're going to have to give employees those great benefits. And most of the time you find that the companies with the best benefits are the companies with the greatest profit margins. Apple, for example, is one of the most profitable companies in the world, and it has some of the most lucrative benefit packages of any company on the planet. But that's because they have the money, because of the profit that they make, to do that. So when you start going off on people making profit and you say we need to cut their profit, we need to take their profit, you're going to take away from the people who work for that company, because the benefits come out of profit. It also provides tax revenue for the poor. Profit provides tax revenue for the poor. The government only gets tax on net profit. So if there is no profit, then there is no tax revenue for the government to collect, and then there is no money to be used for the poor and for social programs that are necessary. Not all social programs are bad. So when we say we hate profit and we want to take away profit, well, we're taking away the money that can be used for the government to receive tax revenue. So when we drive up business costs and try and drive down profits, it hurts the poor because there's nothing for them to receive. And then a little known fact about profit is that it provides the tax revenue to pay Social Security benefits. I've mentioned this before, I'll say it again, and we'll talk about this in greater detail soon in another session. But there is no money in Social Security. There is no money in the Social Security Trust Fund. All the money for the Social Security Trust Fund that has been collected over the last, whatever it's been, 70, 80 years, has all been loaned to the Treasury and spent. So all we have in the Social Security Trust Fund is a massive IOU that says the Treasury owes all that money back, but that money is gone. So what happens today is, part of that gross profit dollars, when I work, I have to pay a certain amount. I think it's roughly 7.5% of Social Security tax, and then my employer pays a 7.5% as well. That 7.5% that the employer pays comes out of their gross profit. So that money that's there for profit is actually going into the government and then being paid out as Social Security benefits right now. None of that money is being stored away for me for later. All that money is spent out right now. But if we don't have profits in companies, if companies run low on profits and go out of business, there is no tax money to pay those Social Security benefits. So there is a lot of good that comes from profit that is not talked about in our culture. Well, this brings up another question. Why would a business not stay open without profit? Because that's essentially what we're saying here is, if a company can't make a good profit, whatever the owners of that company deem to be good profit, then that company will close its doors. And if that company closes its doors, it's not paying benefits, it's not paying wages, it's not paying taxes, and it's not paying Social Security and other types of benefits that are taken out of payroll, what we call payroll taxes. But why not? Why would a business not stay open if there was no profit? Why would an owner close up $1 million business if there was no profit in it? Well, let's look at that for a moment. Why would a business owner not stay open if there was no profit or too little profit? First of all, it's God-given in each of us to desire to get the maximum return on the time and money that we put into something. We'll talk about it in a moment, but there's a whole lot of work that goes on in starting a business. And you don't want to do that work, you don't want to take that risk, you don't want to make that commitment and not be able to get something out of it. It's only natural. How long would you work if you had to go to work and at the end of the week your boss didn't pay you anything? And you worked 40 hours and you did all your work, you did a great effort, you actually brought some value to the company. How long would you do that? You wouldn't do it long at all, because you want a return on your time. You want a return on your effort. Well, business owners are no different. So when we get mad at business owners and say, well, they need to take less profit and they need to stay open and just deal with it. They're here for the good of everybody else. Well, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't work for free, and neither will business owners. A second reason is that they have other options for their time and money. They have other options. This is, in economics, we call this opportunity cost. Opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is what you give up to do what you do. So if a business owner gives up a $75,000 a year job to start a business, then the opportunity cost is $75,000. So if you can't make at least $75,000 in the business, then there's no reason to have the business. You might as well go work for someone else, because you're going to maximize your time, maximize your return. If you had to put $100,000 of your own money up to start your business, and you could put it in the stock market and make 10%, then your opportunity cost is $10,000, 10%. Well, if you can't make that 10% back in your business, then you might as well sell the business. You see, it doesn't make any sense. It's common sense, regular, everyday logic that if you can't make a good enough profit, you're not going to stay open. And as we already indicated, all of this takes all kinds of time, all kinds of risk, and all kinds of sacrifice. Why would you do that if you couldn't get anything back from it? And that's why businesses just won't stay open. So when you start talking about taking profit, when you start talking about chiseling away at profit through a 70% tax rate, which is what AOC recommended earlier, we read that quote. What you're doing is you're removing that incentive for the business to even stay open. And if the business doesn't stay open, what happens to the employees? What happens to the tax revenue? You see what I mean? We have to let people make tax. We have to make profit so that they will stay open. And that is only what we would do, each of us, reasonably. But let's ask ourselves the question, is God against profit? Doesn't it seem, Wes, immoral to take advantage, quote unquote, of a fellow human being by trying to make a profit off of them? And therefore, if it's immoral, certainly God is against profit. Well, let's look at a verse that touches on and actually speaks of profit in the context of business and see what God thinks about this and why God may not be against profit. James 4:12 through 16. James is talking to some businessmen here. He says, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell, and make a profit." That's directly talking about profit in business. "Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. But now you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil." So what is James against here? Is he against profit? Is he against making a plan and going to some other place? Apparently what these merchants were doing is they had collected their goods and they went to a city and they stayed there and they sold them. And their expectation was to make a profit. And that word profit there means to make a profit. It means profit. It means to take some kind of a benefit or a profit. But what is he upset about here? He's not upset about profit. God is not upset about profit. Why? For some of the reasons that we all talked about. It is God-given within us to want to maximize the return on what we have. Profit provides things that give people work. It gives them jobs. It gives tax revenue. There's a lot of really good things that come out of profit. It keeps businesses open and provides goods for people. What is God against here? He is against people who were making plans without consideration for the will of God. These men had become arrogant, and they thought they were the deal. And they were going to go to this city or that city, and we're going to make all kinds of money. We're going to do whatever we want. But look at what he says here. He says, what is your life? It's a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills. But now you boast in your arrogance. He's not against profit, he's against arrogance. He's against making plans without consideration of the will of God. He's against pride. When somebody rises up and thinks that they're so good and they've got things so figured out that they don't need to consider God's will. He wanted to see them humble in their plans and say, Lord, if the Lord wills it, we'll go and we'll make a profit. We'll go and we'll stay. We'll be able to benefit and pay our employees. But he doesn't like the arrogance that he's seeing. God is not against profit. He is against arrogance. Here's a quote from the book. Is the Bible against greed? Talking about profit and connecting it to greed. Of course it is. From the early pages of the Bible, God condemns greed. The 10th commandment says, you shall not covet. And Jesus said, one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses. Greed and profit do not have to be connected, however. God's power can help a man earn a profit but not fall to greed. A child of God understands that, while he has to earn a profit to provide for his family and employees, ultimately his trust is in God to meet his needs. Therefore, he does not have to put profit first all the time. His main goal is to do good so that he may show the greatness of God. But greed is not the only thing that God is against in business. God is against a lot of other things in business. God is against fraud or trickery of all kinds in business. He's against manipulating the truth to gain an advantage. He's against false sales advertisements and false claims. Proverbs 11:1. Dishonest scales are an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. There were merchants in the old times that would weigh out products to sell you a pound of flour or whatever. And they would shave off the weights on one side of the scale so that they would offer you a pound of sugar or flour or whatever and only give you 9/10 of a pound. God is against any kind of a manipulative measure or process like that in business or anywhere else. God is also against lying and manipulating the truth in business. Proverbs 12:22. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who deal truthfully are his delight. I've been in sales for more than 20 years, and I have seen how often business people and salespeople lie to get an order. Lie about what's in stock, lie about delivery, lie about prices, lie. God is against lying, whether it's doing your taxes or making a sale. You don't have to lie. If you do have to lie, don't take the sale. But God is also against evil products and services. And this is becoming more and more of an issue in the United States as we become more of an evil culture, as we legalize more evil acts. God is against every business that runs prostitutes. God is against every business that has an escort service, every strip club, every business that sells alcohol, allowing people to get drunk and become intoxicated. God is against all forms of evil businesses. He's against pornography. Any business that has anything to do with pornography, God is completely against it. I don't care how much you give to charity. I don't care how many people you employ. I don't care how much tax is levied on your business. If you're doing something evil with your business, God is against you. What about the marijuana industry? Legalized marijuana spreading through the nation. Is God against that? Is God against getting high? Getting a buzz? He absolutely is. Ephesians 5:18. And do not be drunk with wine, in which is dissipation, but be filled with the Spirit. God is saying, don't be controlled by another substance. Be controlled by me. My Spirit, let my Spirit have control over you. And the drunkenness does not have to simply be alcohol. Any form of intoxication. CNBC, of all people, ran an article in 2011 against marijuana. Why we should not legalize marijuana. And they pointed out a couple of things in that article. Here's one of the things that they said. The rate of driving under the influence of marijuana is 4 times higher than driving under the influence of alcohol, and is expected only to increase in states where it is legalized. Did you read that? You think drunk driving is a problem? The rate of driving under the influence for marijuana is 4 times higher than driving while drunk. There's another quote. According to the National Survey on Drug Use, quote, people who are addicted to alcohol are 2 times more likely to be addicted to heroin. Now listen to this. People who are addicted to marijuana are 3 times more likely to be addicted to heroin. They say it's not a gateway drug. A gateway drug is a drug that leads to something else. But what does this say? It says that's a lie. That if you are on marijuana, if you use marijuana, you are 3 times more likely to be addicted to heroin. And what does heroin do to lives? There's a reason we called them potheads when we were growing up, everybody. Those who are my age and older. There's a reason for that. God is against the marijuana industry. Do not invest in it. Do not support it. Do not vote to approve it. I don't care how much tax money you get from it. God is against it. It is an evil industry.